Hi, Liz. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today and being my guest. I'm excited about this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a
Of
pleasure to be
course,
here.
of course. So to start, I'm going to ask you to share with our listeners who is Liz Henry, both on a personal and professional level.
Oh, that's a broad question.
I'll drill down at some point, so you can just give me the highlights or give the
Uh,
listeners the highlights.
okay. Well, who is Liz Henry? Liz Henry is a wife. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I am a pediatrician, a parent coach and consultant, a youth consultant, and just a person who loves to make a difference and help the community at large.
Okay, excellent. So this may seem like a very odd question, but I'm going to ask you, like, how did you start your day today? I'm always curious how women
Ooh.
start their days, you know?
How did I start my day?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got up now that we're in when COVID and virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
My husband works downstairs in the basement,
Okay.
and I have my office upstairs. So
Mm-hmm.
so he's the coffee maker in the house.
Okay. I
So,
understand.
so I get up and to a fresh cup of coffee that he
Mm-hmm.
makes, and he
Mm-hmm.
actually brought it to me upstairs.
Nice.
And yes, yes, and so I had a cup of coffee and did some meditation. So I
Mm-hmm.
start out the day with some meditation, some breathing exercises, and just to get in the right frame of mind, especially
Mm-hmm.
since I knew I was going to be on this podcast. And did some writing because I like to spend some time, at least 15 or 20 minutes a day, doing some personal writing, and
Mm-hmm.
got ready for this podcast.
Okay.
Mhm.
So is this a daily practice that you engage in?
I try to engage in. I definitely try to meditate and have that personal time of solitude
Mm-hmm.
because I find that prepares my mind for the day and puts me in a right frame of mind. And
Hmm.
I've been doing that regularly for the last, I would say, a year or so. And it's
Okay.
made me less reactive,
Hmm.
uh, more responsive, more thoughtful in how I
Right.
approach different situations,
Okay.
especially if they're challenging.
Right. So I asked that question because pre-COVID and now, I would still ask the same question, but I have found from people that I've spoken to, as well as my own personal experience, that I don't do it daily, but I need something, right, to take the edge off. Right?
Yes.
So this last year, for many of us, it's just been a challenge. And, I always say I'm a tough person, but I cracked a couple of times, throughout this last year. And I'm finding that meditation helps because it's like if I don't start the day by picking up my phone and, just tending to everything else that everyone else has going on and just giving myself a chance to get grounded, calm my mind, ease out of bed,
Yes.
all
Yes.
of that. And it helps. And
Yes.
so when I speak to people like you who say that you engage in these practices, meditation and breathing exercises, that it just calms you, right?
Oh,
And it
yes.
just prepares you for the day. Now, my husband makes coffee every morning too. So now he's got to step up his game a bit, right? Because he doesn't bring it to me in the morning. I have to come down and get it, but he's got my mug set out and he's got the right amount of cream and all that. But yeah, I'm gonna have to share that with him.
Well, it's funny because my husband will say, "Well, you can make coffee." I was like, "But you make it so much better."
Exactly, that extra bit of love in it. I know, but you know what? Before Keurigs and all that, I try. I just can't do it. He does great with French pressing. I'm like, I've
Yeah,
tried it. I just don't have the magic touch, But that's okay. I'm okay
yeah.
not to have that. So, so that you mentioned that you have one daughter, and you also mentioned that you're a pediatrician. So I'm going to hold off on your daughter for a second, right?
Okay.
So, as a pediatrician, how long did you practice? Or do
Uh,
you still practice? Because listeners don't know.
Right, right. So I practiced pediatrics for 17 years. I went to Princeton undergrad, University of Pennsylvania for med school, and then Georgetown for my pediatric residency. Worked a year in the faculty practice at Children's Hospital in
Hmm.
Philadelphia, decided I didn't like academic medicine.
Hmm.
So I joined a practice in North Brunswick, New Jersey, a New Brunswick pediatric group where I became a partner and worked there for 17 years. So,
Hmm.
and that was a blessing. It was a great partnership. We were like a small family unit. So,
Okay.
which was a very wonderful experience. And
Mm-hmm.
then my partner and I sold the practice in 2014. And that's when I jumped off, stopped practicing. I could practice if I want to. I have all my licensing and
Hmm.
everything else is up to date. But now I have a consulting company, which I created, Dr. Liz Consulting Company,
Mm-hmm.
where I do more parent coaching. I'm a public speaker. I do one-on-one parent coaching virtually, via telehealth or over the phone. And I create and develop student workshops for schools, universities, and organizations that deal with particularly teens, preteens to young adults.
Okay. So, well, excellent background. I mean, that's impressive, very impressive.
Thank you.
So, how old was your daughter? So, 2014. How old was your daughter at that time? So, she was still in high school then, right?
She was still in high school.
Okay,
So she 2014, so that she was a sophomore
sophomore.
year. I think it was
Okay.
sophomore year.
And so, as you're raising her, what does she have a chance to witness with you? Like, did you take her to the office? Did you let her see you in action? Like, because, and I'm asking, so full disclosure,
Mhm.
listeners, Liz and I know each other, so I know some of her stories. So I have to be mindful to when I say certain things to make sure I explain it a little bit. So I already, of course, I knew that your daughter was a sophomore in high school in 2014. So did you have an opportunity to like take her to the hospital with you and to see if medicine was kind of her thing? And I asked that because your daughter's more on the creative
Yes,
side now. She's
yes,
chosen that for her career.
yes.
So did you share that side of you with her?
Well, she had the opportunity to see all of it.
Okay.
Sometimes she would come to the office. Uh, even when she was sick, she would come to the office. Well, my
Mm-hmm.
partner was her
Oh,
pediatrician. I wasn't a
okay.
pediatrician.
Okay.
So she would come to see Dr. Chen, my partner, when she was sick. And since I was working and my husband was working, sometimes she would stay in the office in a separate room
Uh-huh.
and stay for the day. She would observe, she would follow me rarely, but a couple of times she followed me to see what I was doing. But since I'm on call all the time, or since I was
Mm-hmm.
on call all the time from home, taking phone calls at all hours of the night or on the
Mm-hmm.
weekends, she would hear me, take these calls. Of course, they
Hmm.
were confidential. She didn't hear the people I was talking to,
Right. Right.
but she would see the type of lifestyle and some of the things that I did, and she was definitely like, I don't want to do that.
I know that happens sometimes, right? When they're like, "No, I've watched enough. That's
Yeah,
not me.
yes,
It's not
like,
me." So you had the
yeah,
benefit of that, because I know a lot of moms trying to manage their careers are challenged with kids being home. So now, if your child is sick, you had the benefit of come to the office. So, you know what I mean? You can just kind of hang out here. All
yeah. She
right.
either came to my office, or when my husband was working close, he had a inner office, so she would set up shop there with her. At the time, they had DVD players and all of that
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So, and
Right.
would spend the day there. So,
Well, you guys are fortunate because we know the stories. I'm sure we both heard tons of stories over the years about, families struggling when you've
yes,
got both parents are at the office or whatever, and then you've got 6 kids. I remember when I had worked at, so one time I was at Revlon actually, and my husband was working at University Hospital, and my son had gotten ill, and I forgot what it was though. And we had to take turns being home, and we used to fight about it. I have to work. No, I have to work. Well, I have to. And it's like, whose job is more important? It's like, my job is more important.
Right.
And, you know, and it was like this constant battle. So we used to say, okay, you do 4 days and I'll do 4 days. So, oh my goodness, I remember those days.
Right.
Take that off.
Right. I know. But when you think we were blessed that we were able to manage and maneuver that, some people don't,
That's
some
true.
parents don't have that flexibility in their
That's true.
jobs. And then like, what do you do?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I remember the days, you know, watching my mother struggle back, you know, because my father was very chauvinistic, and it was like, that's your job. And then she's like, what am I supposed to do with these kids when they got ill? So yes, I can appreciate having had that flexibility. So 17 years practicing, and so then you made the transition to becoming a parent coach.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen? How did you decide that you want to go from practicing medicine to then coaching parents?
Mm-hmm.
So clearly you worked with parents all along, but
Yes.
now it's just in a totally different realm. How did that come to be?
It was a process. It was a process that I had to come to terms with. So back in 2009, when I was practicing, I realized that there was a missing, particularly for parents of preteens on up, preteens through young adults, because we took care of patients through college, so through 22, 23. So a lot of parents would come to me for advice that wasn't particularly medical, but it had to do with challenges that their young person was facing that impacted their physical and emotional well-being, whether it was bullying, how do they communicate with them, or they were worried that they were involved with the wrong crowd or succumbing to peer pressure. And as a pediatrician, I only had 15 minutes allotted times to see the parents. And these issues took longer than 15 minutes, but I really wanted to deal with them because they were important. And I found that parents had nowhere else to go and resorted to their physician to answer these questions. So I began to say, well, I don't have time to deal with them here. Let's schedule a longer appointment, you know, next week. And I started to do it that way. And then I realized that I wanted to do more to make a difference in this area. So I created a consulting company out of which I began to do workshops for parents, workshops for teenagers on a volunteer basis, in whether it's via churches or Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. I began to do a lot of talks, and I began to be known in the practice, even among my colleagues, as, oh, you need to talk to Dr. Liz about this particular topic. Or if you're concerned about your teen, make an appointment with Dr. Liz. So I became passionate about that. My colleagues knew I was passionate about that. And so they would refer patients to me. So over the years, it became more of a calling, and the practice of medicine, I became dissatisfied with it, not because of the patients, not because of making the diagnoses and the clinical practice, but I found that the practice of medicine was changing, and about 60 to 75% of the time I was dealing with the business end of it, dealing with insurance companies, staffing, HR, pension plans, and all of these things that I didn't go to medical school for. They really didn't train me to do the business aspect of it.
Right.
And so I felt I could make a bigger difference. And there was this nagging, feeling. It would always come back. I would always go back, you know, should I step out and should I do this? And I really want to make more of a difference with parents and with teens. And I saw that I was gifted at talking to parents and having teens really get who they are and realize their potential and come up with positive choices that their parents wanted them to make, but they wouldn't make because their parents were telling them to do that.
Right. Yeah, I've unfortunately had that experience where, my kids would listen to their pediatrician before
Yes.
they listen to me.
Right. And your pediatrician would say the exact same thing that you've been saying.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they were like, oh,
Right.
really?
Like they've heard it for the first time. It's like,
Right.
okay, I'll get over it. Just go with it.
Right. Right. So I realized what I really loved doing is being that liaison between the parents and young people, and bridging that communication gap, because there's a huge gap that occurs between them. And so coaching parents on how to connect with their teens in a way that their teens understand them, and coaching and talking to teens so that they are able to make the right choices that their parents want them to make, the positive decisions.
So do the parents kind of have conversations with you first so that you can kind of sway their teens to think what they want them to think, or to act the way they want them to act? Because that would be great.
Well, yes. Well, I do talk to the parents and get their perspectives, but but sometimes I don't side with the teen, but sometimes I enlighten the parents to the fact that, what they're talking about and what they want their teen to do may not be the best thing for the teen, or the best way for the teen to go.
And
so
how does that go over? How does that go over? Well, parents don't want you to be objective. Well, I think that I've often heard people that say that they've literally changed careers talk about that nagging feeling, right?
Yes.
That thing that you just cannot describe other than how you defined it, right? It's a nagging thing that when you're at rest, it's on your mind. When you are busy, it comes into play. Yes. Like it's just always there.
Yes.
So at some point you feel you have to act on it. And you did what I've heard often as well, which is you start kind of testing something out, right? Because you kind of, even if you don't know that you're testing it out literally, even if your plan wasn't necessarily to start a consulting practice, but you heard what the parents had to say from your patients, and you got insight from that, and you were able to shape your consulting practice, I guess, based on that. So that's perfect. But I think what's admirable is that, you heard the parents, you cared enough to go beyond those 15 minutes. So you took your personal time to do so. And that 15-minute thing, like I've heard that years ago, and that is so frustrating because as parents, we wait all year, a whole year in many cases. Well, if you're fortunate, as long as there are no issues in between, you wait a whole year to get an appointment, and you're like 15 minutes, So I literally go with questions.
Right. You have them written down.
Right, be very effective, or efficient actually during those 15 minutes. But I think, like I said, it's admirable that you went beyond that to figure out how else you can help parents. So that means when you made that transition, it was a leap, but it wasn't far-fetched, right? Because you kind of already knew, I guess what you said from 2009. So for about 5 years, you kind of already had that experience in that area. So did you have an opportunity to build a network before launching your practice?
Well, it was more about creating the brand or rebranding myself.
Okay.
So in the practice, I was known as Dr. Henry, and the pediatrician, and who's in the practice. And I rebranded myself. So now I go by Dr. Liz. So that's my new brand. And I was known in the community for practicing at the group. And now it was rebranding myself, being known as a public speaker, a workshop facilitator. And so it was reinventing myself. So it was in the process of reinventing myself, and also working as an entrepreneur and doing things like marketing and sales, which I wasn't trained in at all. So it was learning new skills and creating an infrastructure around me of people who knew how to do those things.
But you also had a taste of it with your practice as a pediatrician, right? Once you became a partner. So it kind of started to prepare you for that unknown element later.
Yes.
Sort of,
Yeah.
right? In some
Yeah.
respects.
Yeah. That got me thinking in that realm.
Right.
Right.
And I think sometimes things happen and we have no idea why they're happening and how we're going to leverage something later. Because I can look back at things that I've done and go, oh yeah, I remember when this and this took place. And now I'm using those skills that I had no clue at the time I would need now,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
So,
well, and I found, like, when you were saying that, you see, when you look back, it's easy to look back, and hindsight is, 2020, and you look back and you see it. But when you're in the weeds, and you probably have experienced this yourself, when you're in the weeds, you have no idea how things are going to connect, and if they're going to connect.
Right.
And I found that I'm my own worst enemy. So it's all that self-talk and that doubt, and that, like, what am I, crazy? Like, why am I? So I have all these thoughts going in my head, like, I'm going, I trained this long to be a pediatrician, went through med school, residency, practiced for 17 years. And now I'm just gonna throw that away and create something new that's unknown. And so it's kind of moving through and taking action anyway, despite those thoughts. Because for me, I was always on a path. It was easy. It was a hard path, but it was easy because it was laid out, right? Okay, I'm going to go from Princeton. You go to medical school, you get through medical school, you go to residency, and then you practice. Right. And that was like A to B to C to D. If you follow those paths, if you do your homework, and if you'll get to the other side. But this path was not linear. So it's like A to B, and then maybe go back to A, and then there's a D over there. So, and I wasn't used to working on a nonlinear path. So for me, there was a lot of angst and anxiety and what's going to happen, and all of that I had to push through. Right.
But you did it anyway.
Yes.
And that's the piece that gets me, because I always say, if something is calling you, you know it. And it doesn't go away. It may be suppressed for a little bit at certain times, but it doesn't go away. And I always say to myself and to others in my family that I don't want to live with regrets, right? I don't want to be that 80, 90-year-old, knock on wood. Hopefully I'm able to live healthily and happily till then. But I don't want to look back and go, darn, if I tried, if I took a chance. And in your with respect to you, you have your licenses, right? So even if you take a chance now and you decide to do something later, or to go back and incorporate being a pediatrician into your life again, or solely do that, either way, you're not going to lose, right? You can't lose.
Right.
So, so I think that also helps. But taking a chance, just taking a risk, that's kind of what life is about, right? Especially, I mean, it also depends on who you are as an individual, if you're able to do that. But as you're thinking about those things, I'm sure you're sharing your thoughts and your feelings with your family, right? So both your daughter and your husband. Were they receptive to this, to your new idea or your desire to have a new career and abandon what you've built all these years?
They were, and my husband was, I couldn't have done it without the support of my husband, jumping off and trying something new. So he was extremely supportive, and has always been supportive of me throughout my journey, because we got married when I was a third year in medical school. So he's seen me from the very beginning, and the transformation that I've taken. So, and I've talked about it to him so much that at some point he's like, will you do it already?
Right. And sometimes you just need to hear that, like, Right.
And so he was like, I'm tired of hearing you talk about it. Just do it. So, and my daughter was very supportive as well. And especially now, she's just out of college, and
Mm-hmm.
and so she's very supportive, and she's a creative person.
Mm-hmm.
So creating something new is what she does all the time. So
Right.
she's supportive of me and my creative efforts.
And I'm sure now, because she's, what, how old is she now? 22?
Almost 23 in a couple weeks.
Almost. Okay. So, oh, so she's literally right behind my son. Okay. Because my son just turned 23. So, so she's had a chance now to witness this, right? She experienced this with you.
Yes.
And I always think for women that helps to show our daughters so that they're not fearful of taking chances. Like it may be innate in them to be a risk taker, but I think if they witness and experience what we've gone through and we show them that it can be done at any stage in life, that I think it's helpful, because then she's probably going to take that with her and go, well, if my mom did this and this and this at this point in her life, like she has nothing to lose,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So can you share with our listeners what your daughter does?
Yes.
What career path is she pursuing?
So Lauren is just graduated last May 2020, from the University of Southern California Film School.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wants to pursue life in the entertainment industry. She wants to work in a writer's room,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually run her own show, create and develop her own
Good
show,
for her.
and eventually have an entertainment company. So she
Mm-hmm.
also, besides writing and directing, she also has a music persona. And
Mm-hmm.
so she creates and sings her own songs. So she has songs on Spotify. So she's the creative genius in the family, I call it. She has, so that's her. I live vicariously through her creative efforts.
Right, right.
Because
So,
those are efforts that I know nothing about.
so how did you feel about that? Because your husband's in finance and you are in medicine and
Yeah.
now coaching. So, how did the two of you feel about her pursuing a totally different path? One
Well,
is, you know, you may be unfamiliar with.
right. I actually encouraged it, because I think it's so important for young people to pursue what they're passionate about. And I think
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, whatever they're passionate about, when you're passionate about something, you find a way to make a living at it,
Mm-hmm.
and to make it work. And I gave her my old laptop, Macintosh, when she was in 5th grade. And she started putting together film clips, and teaching herself how to use
Oh,
iMovie.
this started
And
early.
yeah,
Okay.
and she would spend hours working and editing and teaching herself how to do that. And I realized that she was good at it. She
Hmm.
loved to do it, and that was her passion. So my husband and I encouraged her by giving her lessons, or taking summer classes in film,
Mm-hmm.
and she just blossomed.
Hmm.
And she has this natural talent. She was in school plays and musicals. So we both saw
Mm-hmm.
that she was very talented in this area. So, and wanted her to thrive, because that was what she was great at. That's what she loved to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me, it was funny, because she says, I don't know why people ask me all the time, don't you want to follow in your mother's footsteps and be a doctor? Because he's like, there is no way I want to do that. And you had to
Hey.
realize she was totally opposite of me. So
Hmm.
I was this like straight A, have to get A's, like would fall out if I got a B type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And, she would get a C, and I knew she could have gotten an A in the class,
Mm-hmm.
but if she didn't like a class, and, she would get a C,
Then
and I
you
was like,
knew it.
Lauren, she was like, well.
Right, right, right.
At first we'd have these battles, because
Right.
she needed to get A's, and once I realized who she was as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and what she was capable of, and she's not a mini me. And I just let her, I just helped to develop her passions, and I found that I was here just to help her blossom. My husband and I are here to help her blossom to become her own individual and unique person.
Right, right. And I think that's
It's hard,
commendable.
but
It
it's
is
hard.
hard. It is hard,
It's
especially
hard.
if you're like, if you're the studious type, just everything's about academics, and she's more creative.
Yes.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
You can't, you can't force a square peg into a round hole.
You can, but the fact that you were able to just let her be probably helps her thrive more, right?
Yeah, right.
So now, do you share these personal experiences in your coaching practice? So if you're speaking from a stage, or if you're doing a one-on-one consultation, do you share with them your personal experiences and your approach to something, and maybe it'll help them? Or do you try to keep your personal life separate?
No, I definitely share with them. So, and I have a book that I just, it will be published in May. So a lot of the Lauren stories are.
Did you get her permission?
I did. So a lot of those little stories are in there.
Okay.
So definitely. So
so funny.
So, but the book is called "You Are Not a Bad Parent: A Pediatrician's Guide to Reducing Conflict and Connecting with Your Teens." So I definitely put my stories in there because parents aren't alone. I had to grow, and I had to develop, and I had to learn, and I had struggles and arguments and knock down, drag out fights, right?
But you also have the credibility too, right? Because if I've ever thought about, say, seeing someone, I'm making this up because I probably need to go see a therapist, but I haven't yet. But like I would know that you've had similar experiences, right? So that it could, because, let's just say, knock on wood, literally knock on wood, banging on wood.
You're knocking wood.
You go to like a family practice attorney or a divorce attorney. It's like, I don't know if I want to talk to you, considering you haven't been through what I've been through or what I'm going through. You know what I mean? I just think sometimes that if that person can relate to your experiences more, then I think you listen to them more.
Yes.
That's just like someone advising you on being a mother, but they have never parented. It's just
right.
And it's not saying that they can't. I'm just saying, from my personal experience, I would want that. But anyway.
And then being a parent coach doesn't mean I'm a perfect parent, right? Or a perfect mom, or so I've gone through some things and have to catch myself in the middle. Like I'm doing what I'm telling parents not to.
Right.
So it's not like, but it's gaining these strategies and having these strategies and skills in your toolbox so that you can, when you're in the midst of whatever challenge you're having with your teen, you can interrupt it and pull it out. It's like, oh, I'm doing that thing. So I need to pull back. Right.
Well, so I was thinking so when you decided to switch to your consulting practice, do you think the timing that you chose was the right time? Because you said you closed it in 2014. What made you close it? Was it just time to close it, and why was it the right time?
I guess I probably didn't know it was the right time till looking back and saying, oh, that was the right time.
Right.
But in 2014, I was thinking about it so much, and that that voice, that inner voice, saying, kind of telling me that I need to move forward on the parent coaching, and that idea became so loud that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I had to step out on faith, saying that, okay, I'm not going to allow it. God is telling me that it's time. So I'm not going to ignore it anymore. And I'll step out on faith and do that. So, and it was the right time. Lauren was a sophomore. So I had to step back and develop this practice into a full-time practice or a consulting business. And it gave me more time to be with Lauren during that time period, during the latter years of her being in high school, which was very helpful for our relationship and
Mhm.
drew us even closer.
So you consciously thought about that timing, because I think, and I can speak for myself, when you're like, now that I'm there, right, with my second one getting ready to go off to college, when she got to like her sophomore year, I just felt this pressure. like all of a sudden I felt this sense of urgency that I needed to do what I was going to do like right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as though in 2 years when she graduates, which happens to be now, that I couldn't embark upon whatever journeys I wanted. It was just that, I don't know, it was something about that time going, it's almost over. I've got to be ready, right? Because I had this little fear of, when she's done, I'm stuck and I'm in limbo. And I don't really have my plan that I can execute against, because all of a sudden you find yourself with all of this time. What the heck do you do? So I just did a podcast episode about, well, it was about one thing. It's about the midlife topic, that label of midlife, which I hate.
Okay.
But in that, I talked about how I watched both my mother and my mother-in-law kind of be in a certain place because they didn't have a plan for when their kids went off to college and then left their home. And I always remembered that, going, that can't be me. I have to have a plan, because, you know, I always look at my mother and go, don't you have something to do? She's like, no. I'm like, you're just sitting in a den reading a book. Like, don't you have somewhere to go, somewhere to be? We've got all this family. And she's like, no, I don't have anything to do. And because she made her life, our life, her life, right?
Right.
So that's why for me, that sophomore year was like, oh shit, I only have 2 years left. I've got to get it together. So that I have all these things in place when she's gone, you know?
Right.
And now I'm there now. I'm like, I'm literally like freaking out. Emotional about her leaving, but also feeling as though I need to execute against this plan like now. I don't want to find myself in limbo, because then I think it could take you to another place, right? A sad place. And I don't want to be sad, you know?
Yes.
I want to be that mom who's like, oh, catch me late. No, honey, I can't make it this weekend. Maybe next weekend I can come and see you, you know?
Right.
Just sitting by the phone, please call me. I'm making sure that's not going to happen.
No, that's not going to happen. That's
not going to happen, no. So pre-pandemic, because I can only imagine what your practice is like today. And I'll ask you about that in a second. So pre-pandemic, were you in a good place? And like, what types of things were parents calling you about? I mean, you have to share details, like about anyone in particular, but like, who would call a parent coach?
Parents who are really, well, you have many different extremes. So a parent who's at their wit's end, who doesn't know how to communicate with their young person, and there's just tension and strain and stress, and they seem to be on different wavelengths. So a parent who wants to learn how to come closer, to get more connected to their teen, so that they can help support them. So that's a parent who might want to call me. Or just go ahead.
Is it usually during the high school years, or is it earlier in some cases?
It's earlier in some cases, because it could be just teenage years, like, so 13, 14, it's a lot of times it's in middle school, where there's that tension. There's a parent who is co-parenting and is having some difficulties and wanted some direction in how to co-parent their child.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to be in bad straits to
Mm-hmm.
call me. So you can take a bad relationship to good, a good to great, a great to extraordinary. There's always levels. You can always level up in your relationship with your teen. So, so a variety of different types of parents.
Okay. So during the pandemic, I know what I experienced. I know my kids at some point were pulling their hair out, like, we can't take this anymore. Did you find that your practice changed in terms of the reasons people would contact you to work with you, or was it consistent across the board? So was it the same as beforehand?
Well, it wasn't the same, and I'm still building the practice. So I'm in the process of building the one-on-one coaching. So I did during the pandemic a lot more virtual organizational talks for college students. I did a virtual talk for some students from the University of Southern California on creating their future, and kind of took them through a workshop, a 90-minute workshop on how to, first you have to give yourself permission to feel and get present to all the emotions and the feelings you're having now. And then after you kind of understand where you are, give yourself permission to feel the disappointment, the anger, the frustration, then start creating. Okay, so now what am I going to create despite all these challenges? So I led a course for them, and I participated in some panels at Princeton University. So I've done a lot more virtual group courses and group coaching. So I found that that has increased during the pandemic.
So you mentioned college students. Did they reach out to you, or were their parents reaching out to you? I'm just curious. So for college students, if they're struggling with certain things and they wanted someone to talk to, so would they take that upon themselves to contact you?
No, it's more the parents. So it's more the parents. You know, at some point when I first started the consulting group, I was marketing more directly to teens and young adults. But then I realized that they're not going to reach out to me. It's going to be the parents are the key. And first of all, the parents are going to pay for it, right? So
those kids don't have any money.
And they're not gonna connect. So that's when I more focused on the parents, first of all, coaching the parents to support them, and then in coaching the parents, talking directly to teens and young people, because I love talking to teens and young people, because I find I don't lecture to them, because lecturing makes no difference, right? When you're lecturing and telling them what to do, it goes in one ear and out the other. But
I just can't help it. I do it anyway.
I know. But if I found that when I have the teens and the young people actually create it for themselves and come up with their own solutions, then they own it. It's theirs. And they're more likely to implement it. It may be the same thing you were telling them to do, but if it comes from them, they're like, oh, well, it's mine.
Right. And that's when we learn to just go, okay.
Yes.
As long as the outcome is what we wanted.
Let it be. Let it be.
Right. Okay. So do you find that your practice is all that you planned and hoped that it would be? And I understand that we all have growth plans, right? So you want to expand, you want to do certain things from it. But as of today, is it fulfilling? Is it all that you've wanted and expected from it?
Yes, it is. I think, and more. It's allowing me, first of all, the flexibility, and actually, even the pandemic has forced all of us to do things remotely and to learn new skills and everything. But it really helped me move forward in technology and aspects which have added added to my practice, which I probably never would have thought of before.
Hmm.
So in the midst of the pandemic, like I created a 21-day email challenge course for parents. And I wouldn't have done that pre-pandemic. And it's called the 21-day Boost Your Connection with Your Teen Challenge. And so when parents enroll in that, they'll get an email from me for 21 days. And the email will give a little lesson and then give an assignment for them to do. And each day the goal of the assignment is to draw them closer to their team. So they'll have practical action steps that they take. So they'll get an email, a little lesson, and then an action step. And then they can reply to me with what opened up, what happened. And so there's a little accountability there as well. But yeah, I wouldn't have developed that. So I found that in the pandemic and during all of this, it's kind of forced me to be creative and sit down, and my creative juices had started working.
Right. Yeah, I think that I think many of us have gone through different phases throughout this last year or so. And with respect to business, though, you've had to be creative. It's like, if you want to stay in business, you better pivot in some way, right? No, but I like that, though. So I did see that on your site, the 21 day to boost your
connection with your team.
I couldn't even read my own handwriting. That's so terrible. Yeah. So, all right, good. No, I could see that, because I mean, this is the perfect time, right? While you have a little bit of time, you can focus on this. I think that's great. So if they're, like you said, if you want to make your good relationship great, if you want to make your great relationship stronger, this is perfect. Okay. So Liz, what kind of wisdom can you share with women who may have been in a similar position to you, where they've built a strong profession, right? They spent a number of years establishing themselves in a particular profession, built their brand around that, but they know in their heart that something else is calling them to do it. How do you advise them to work through those fears, or get over those fears, or deal with those fears, and to go forth and pursue those dreams?
Well, I would say to remember that who you are is not what you do. And because for me, what was difficult is that my identity was tied to being a pediatrician, and like a practicing pediatrician. Like, that's who I am. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Henry. This is who I am. I'm a pediatrician. I'm in a practice. I'm a partner. And that's me. And yes, I'm a mom and a husband, but that was like really like what I was attached to as who I am.
Right.
And so it made it even more difficult for me to switch gears, because if that's who I think I am, then who am I when I'm not that?
Yeah.
So that a lot of that thought was tied into the fears, and so I had to kind of deal with that and realize. So for those in similar positions, just realize that who you are is beyond, is limitless, I would say. Is limitless. So we're capable of doing lots of different things.
Right.
And so who you are is not just who you are, maybe at what you do at the time, but you can also do other things. And it's fine to change gears. It's fine to shift gears. It's fine to forge other paths, because there are endless possibilities. And if you're called to do something, and you hear that call over and over again, then listen to it, because it's something that is, when you follow that, you'll find something extraordinary that you never thought you would find.
I like that. I like that. Right, because it's usually, you just have to step out on the faith, right? What is that? I forgot the line. I always see this image of like and I don't remember if Martin Luther King actually said this, anything with respect to this, but it's like taking that first, like taking that blind step, right? You take that first step and the rest of the stairs will come. I have this visual. Anyway, scratch that.
That happens to me all the time. I think of like a proverb or something, and then I can't, and then I mess it up.
Right. So I definitely messed it up. But bottom line is, yes, step out on faith.
Make your own saying.
Right. Oh man. Anyway, in my head it was profound too. So Liz, so you know that I am definitely making sure that I speak to women who, like us, have prioritized their families over the years, right? So their kids were always, and their husbands came first. And in many cases, we neglected ourselves. I know for me, I did. I got to the point where it was so crazy, and sports came into play for both kids. And because they're 5 years apart, we're dividing and conquering. I mean, things as simple as I never would leave my home if I didn't have on lipstick, eyeliner, and my nails were perfectly done every time. Then I got to the point, I'm like, whatever. I'm barely able to take a shower to get out of this house. But then it works against you, right? Because then I looked in the mirror one day, I'm like, who is this? This isn't even me. Like, I'm the one who worked at Revlon and I loved it, and then I did this and that. And so I often say, like, you should practice selfishism to a certain extent, because you've got to try to maintain a bit of yourself.
Yes.
So my question in all of that, my question to you is, what is a non-negotiable for you? Like, you talked about meditation and breathing exercises earlier, but what else does Liz do? What does Dr. Liz do for self-care? And what is a non-negotiable for you with respect to self-care?
Yes, a non-negotiable. I think the non-negotiables are the meditation. That is a non-negotiable. Taking that time, meditation and breathing. I think that's the most non-negotiable thing for me. I've gotten on the Peloton. So
you did it too? I haven't gotten there yet. It's something about a stationary bike that I just can't.
I know. It took me 2 or 3 years. I was like, I can't see spending that on a bike. But my husband and I both have gotten into like a well-being mindset, and I must say it is worth it. So
good.
So because it creates a community. You have a community of people, and it's not just about the bike; it's about all different types of exercises. So that I've added to self-care, and let's see what else. And reading. So, I mean, that's not non-negotiable, but I try to squeeze in some personal reading when I can.
Okay. Well, excellent. So, Dr. Liz, how can people connect with you and engage with you? Whatever you share with me, I'm going to make sure that I put it in the show notes so people can get access to it. But if you could just verbally let us know how people can connect with you.
They can connect with me by going to my website, which is drlizconsulting.com. They can sign up for to be on my VIP list to be the first to know about my book launch. So that website is youarenotабadparent.com. And that's the website for my book. And they can sign up for that. And they'll also get a freebie. I have like a 10-minute audio that they'll get when they sign up for that. And then for the email challenge, they can go to boostyourconnectionwithyourteens.com.
And is that for specific dates, or is that running on an ongoing basis?
That's on the next one will be mid-April, but afterwards it will be ongoing. So it'll be ongoing, but the next one will start in mid-April, and that's boostyourconnectionwithyourteens.com. And then my Facebook page is Dr. Liz Consulting, and my Instagram is _Dr. Liz, and they can find me there as well.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on the book too. I know that's pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, yes.
To actually see it come to life. It'll be like a few more weeks and you'll be having it in hand. Excellent. Good for you. So Liz, I just want to thank you very much for a great conversation. I think it's been just very enlightening. And I'm sure that your inspirational story is going to be very impactful to at least one person. I love talking to women about taking chances, and even if it's something that you haven't done before, but it's in your mind, it's in your heart, you have to pursue it. And you've just kind of shared your story, which validates that. So thank you for being so open and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great having a conversation with you.
Great. Thank you. And so until next time.